Today I'm with Tem, who is a teacher, a podcaster, a wife, and a mum. And I'm really interested in talking with you, Tem, today because you have lived overseas, and I believe your experiences support you in how you're influencing and supporting other people. I wanted to kick off by establishing where you moved countries from, and to.
So I moved from Saudi Arabia to London. So I was born there and then moved here when I was 10 years old. So that's, gosh, a long time ago now.
And when you what was your experience as you recall? Because being a 10-year-old, you have very vivid memories. It's a very distinct time of age to move at. So what are your memories of living in Saudi Arabia?
I have quite fun memories living in Saudi Arabia because I was a child growing up, and we could go off and do our own things because we lived in a compound. So it was quite secure and safe. We had security guards everywhere. So I'd be out and about on the weekend. My mum wouldn't know where I am. I'd come home about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, ready for dinner. So I really enjoyed Saudi Arabia. I had lots of friends there, and it was a time in my life that I'd never regret because it was something that it was a place where I got to know lots of different people from different cultures. My best friend was Ghanaian, for example. My best friend was Turkish. So I had a lot of English friends because I went to an international school. So the time in Saudi Arabia will always bring me fond memories, I think, for sure.
That's lovely. And when you moved at the age of 10, what was that like for you, moving to the UK?
It, of course, was upsetting because I was leaving all my friends, everything that I knew in Saudi Arabia, because I didn't know anything else really. I used to come to the UK to visit my family every Christmas, but that was just a holiday. It wasn't where I live or where I spend the rest of my life. So initially it was quite upsetting. I was upset. And it was a shock to the system coming here and not knowing anybody apart from my family, for example, and losing that bubble I had in my compound with all my friends and being able to go off and do whatever I wanted. It definitely was a shock to the system, and it did make me a little bit apprehensive, a little bit nervous, but also quite sad because I was missing everything that I had, everything that I left behind in Saudi.
Mm. And how different was life for you? Obviously there's the transition of losing your friends and having to adapt to new schools and things like that. But how different was it in terms of family life, and what made it an upheaval?
I think it was the restriction to my freedom, being able to just go off and do what I wanted when I wanted, and my parents knowing that I'm safe because they knew lots of people in the compound. We all knew each other as a little community. And then coming to London, where, yes, I had family that lived like 10 minutes down the road, but the minute you step outside your door, you've got all these fears, all these things that my parents can't protect me from as such, like they could do in Saudi Arabia. So I think my mum's fear and worry sort of was put onto me, or she didn't mean to do that. Of course she didn't. She's just a parent, but her worry and concerns made me worried. But also, I was fighting within myself because I just wanted to break free and just go off and do stuff that I wanted to do, especially when I started going to primary school and then starting secondary school here, seeing my friends be liberated and take the bus to school and go to cinema. I'm like, well, I can't do that because my mum has to take me everywhere. And I understand, obviously, she was a very protective parent, and I get that now. But back then it was really hard, especially trying to fit in amongst a new group of people in a new country where I should be free, but I felt more restricted than I was in Saudi Arabia.
So there's a bit of an irony, isn't there, that we can make generalizations about Saudi and assume that the freedom might be more restricted there, but for you, your experience was actually the opposite. As a child, you had immense freedom in Saudi, and then in England as a teenager, where peer pressure and everything is hugely impactful. That's when you felt less free.
Yeah, of course, definitely. And that is ironic because I don't know what Saudi Arabia was like now. I'm back in 10 years, over 10 years now, actually, very long time. But back then it wasn't as liberal for women. My mum would be stopped in the streets and be reminded to put a hijab on, which is understandable. It's a religious country and that's how they do things there. But then to come here where actually it's the complete opposite and I can go off and do things. My mum can go out and not have to worry about being stopped in the streets. It's just so different to how I grew up, and then trying to find my feet here and trying to do things that I want to do and make friends, but also be mindful of my parents and my mum and her worrying not cause her any stress. So it did, yeah, it did cause a little sort of tension because I'm trying to be who I want to be, but then of course my mum's trying to protect me and look after me.
Yeah, understandably. And how did you find your freedom? How did you start to make that happen?
I think it there was a point where our car broke down and my mum of course wanted to take me to school and I was 17 years old and she wanted to walk me to school and I just had to say to her, look mum, I'm sorry, but that is embarrassing. I can't walk to school as a 17-year-old girl with my mum by my side. And of course she was upset. I said, look, I'll call you when I get there, it's fine. So off I went, first time ever, 17-year-old walking to school alone. It was only 2 miles, it wasn't very far. That made me feel liberated, but of course my mum was worried, of course she was, but I got to school, found her, it was all fine. So that was my first step, I suppose, of liberation. And then the next step was when I was looking for universities. So I got the grades to go to Loughborough. So I applied, of course, to Loughborough and got in. And on results day, I think it dawned on me, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Loughborough University, I'm going to move out now. So I said to my parents, look, it's fine. I'll have a gap year. I'll apply somewhere else. It's not a problem. But of course, they want the best for me. So they knew that was the best place for me, for my course. So they encouraged me to go. I still had a gap year because I thought I can't just up and leave. I need to give my parents time for this to sink in really and for them to get used to it. But I think that was the next big step in my life in terms of right, off I go into the big bad world, the amazing world, world's your oyster. And forge my own way, really.
And do you think the gap year really made a difference in, because that's quite a generous thing to have done. A lot of teenagers want a gap year for their own benefit, but you wanted a gap year to kind of ease the change for both sides to be comfortable, which was very thoughtful. And did it achieve that?
I think it did help a lot because I got a job in my gap year, so I was getting the bus to work, bus home. So my parents could see me sort of being independent and not worrying so much and trusting that things will be fine and I can go off and do my own thing and come back safely. So I think having that gap year definitely helped in that sense because I could go off and do my own thing. I wasn't driving at that point, didn't drive for about 7 years later, I think. But at least they could see that, yes, I'm a young woman in London, but I can look after myself. I can keep myself safe. So that made them feel a bit more at ease, I think.
And I think they would have wanted to support you in your education because didn't your father have a dream to be, from a young age, he had quite big ambitions for himself, didn't he? So he would have naturally understood when you had your own dreams.
Yeah, so my dad came here when he was 13 years old, couldn't speak a word of English, did his GCSEs when he was 18 years old. And he was telling teachers back then that he wanted to be a surgeon. That's all he wanted to do. He wanted to help people. And they laughed at him, told him to be realistic. So that's never going to happen. And that was basically his drive, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to be. He wrote to university after university after university and eventually finally got into UCL. And that basically forged the rest of his life. And he became a surgeon and he did what he wanted to do. So he never stopped us, like me, from achieving things and doing things that I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to be a PE teacher from the age of 16, and Loughborough was the best university for me. So he was never going to stop me. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, to go off and do what I wanted to do and achieve things that I wanted to achieve, because he knew what that felt like when people were trying to put barriers in his way and stop him and make him feel like he's not good enough, for example. So that's something that I've kept in the back of my mind all my life. Like, my dad is my hero. He's the person I look up to, and he's one I talk about when I talk to kids at school about what he's done and how he's forged his way, and forgetting about what people say and just going and doing what you want to do and be who you want to be. So yeah, he's definitely my inspiration, I'd say.
Mm. And you share, he moved at 13 and had bigger challenges in a way if he had no language, because you had English. So when you came into
Yes,
England, you could already speak fluent English, couldn't you?
yes, I could.
So you didn't have that barrier. But he would have related. In fact, do you think when he moved your family from Saudi that he might have even included his own experiences into how he moved you as a family?
Maybe, yes, because we went to an international school, so we all spoke English. We could read and write from a very young age. My parents are Turkish, so my mum wanted us to learn Turkish. Of course, she did. So we learned both languages at home. We spoke both languages, but I think my dad more so spoke to us in English because he
Mm,
knew how important that would be for us for our futures. Whereas my mum spoke to us in Turkish because that's her culture. That's what she loves. That's what she knows. Um, because although she can speak English, her English is more broken because again she came to the country to be with my dad and she can speak English very well. So I think
mm,
definitely that definitely impacted on the decision my dad made in terms of how he brought us up and when he brought us over here and making sure that we could speak English as well as he could.
mm. And do you think when he took the family over to Saudi in the first place that he probably didn't intend it to be a long term, or do you think when he initially moved to Saudi, he thought it would be a permanent move?
I don't think he thought it would be a permanent move because from what he said when we left, he wanted to make sure that my brothers came here and could go to university here. So we left when my brother was 18, so we come here to university. He also has his family, his brothers who live here. So he had that sort of pull back to this country. He wanted to come back here and set up life here and buy a house and give us some sort of roots here.
Mm,
So I don't think it wasn't a permanent move, but I think in his mind he did consider the fact that it could be a long period of time because my
mm,
brothers were young when we left as well. But he was always going to come back here for
mm,
our education, our further education, and for family.
mm. So he did very much pave the way for that
Mm.
in a way that he had to struggle. Um, so yeah, that's yeah, pretty amazing. And so everybody in your family's moved. Your mum's moved, your dad's moved, and I suppose in some ways the assumption would be that that would make life easy, that you all kind of understand. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, does it? Because, for example, with my father's Ghanaian, and he moved as a young man to England, and probably due to financial reasons and whatever circumstances, didn't go home that frequently. And yet, when I moved away and moved countries, he always wanted to know when I'd be back. He never minded the fact that I'd go. He could really not hold that against me, but he would always want to go, so when I went to China, it was for school, so he knew there was a finite period.
Mm.
And then years later, when I moved to Nigeria, that was unsettling for him because obviously I could have gone for 5 years, 10 years, I could have gone for however long. And he actually made a request that I book a ticket to return within a year, because he wanted to be sure that he saw me within a year. So,
Mm.
how's your experience been of different family members? Everybody's moved, but it doesn't necessarily mean we all understand or empathize with each other's situation. Because on the
Yeah,
face of it, sorry, I was only going to say on the face of it,
so go on.
I was only going to say on the face of it, you'd have thought my dad would be like, sure, bye,
Line the nest,
because,
off you go.
you know, because that's what he'd done, but no.
Yeah, no, I don't think it makes it easier to be fair, because in the back of my mind, I always have the idea of going to Dubai and teaching Dubai for a few years so that I can build up the finances and then come back and start a family here. But I never broached that with my family. I just knew that that would be a no-no. There's no point in even mentioning it with my mum. I just thought there's no point. Yes, she's moved a lot herself, but if she had the choice to go back to Cyprus and live there, she wouldn't have come here. She would have said, let's go to Cyprus. But like I said before, my dad wanted to come here for us and to make sure we were set up for life. So yeah, no, it's just because we've moved a lot doesn't mean that it makes it any easier. Unfortunately, it just doesn't.
No, no, absolutely. And how you're a parent now, so how do you feel now that you're in the shoes of a parent with a young child who, I mean, I don't think you have plans to move anyway, do you? You're not planning on lifting your son out of school, or
Have
you
this conversation
do?
with my husband sometimes.
Mm,
I wouldn't mind if the opportunity came about for me to work somewhere else, then I wouldn't mind doing that because I know I've experienced it as a child, so I can support my son um because of the experiences I had. Of course, I'd be conscious about friends and him leaving his friends and leaving his football team, but if if the opportunity arose and it was something that could improve our standard of living, for example, or make us ease our lifestyle, then yeah, I think I definitely would consider it. My husband probably wouldn't, but I would consider it 100%.
very good. What do you think your son would say? Do you think your son because if he is really into his football, that might be a challenge.
Mm. I think he would be scared. He's never been on a plane, to be fair, not yet. So he's not traveled a lot. So yeah, he'd be anxious, he'd be scared.
Oh, he's
But
young, isn't he?
yeah, he's young, and I mean, I came over here when I was 10, and yes, I missed my friends initially, but like kids, they get on with things.
Mm,
They get used to things, and they find things they can get over things a lot quicker, I think, than adults, because we dwell and dwell and dwell and we go over things and maybe I shouldn't have left, or but with kids don't do that. They just sort
mm,
of make a life for themselves, just carry on, and they get over things a lot quicker, I think, than adults. So yeah, initially you might find it hard, but I think the adventure might draw into it a bit more
mm,
for sure.
mm. And when you went to university, going back to that period of life when you went to university, um, how how did that, because that really was your break, that was your
Mm.
ticket away. So how would you say that forged who you've become, or in connection with having
Mm.
moved countries, but how would you say that's developed you?
I think leaving home and going to Loughborough was probably one of the best decisions I made because it made me more confident. It made me more independent. I didn't have to rely on my parents. I didn't feel shy or anxious because I just thought I have to do it. I'm here on my own. I've got friends now, of course, at uni. But I became more confident, more social. So it helped me develop my skills. And I felt freer. I felt
Mm,
I felt like I didn't have anything holding me back. I felt like I was my own little bubble. So when my poor parents came to visit, of course, no uni student wants their parents to come and visit out of the blue. But when they came and visited, yeah, of course, I love seeing them. But I was, I felt free or liberated when they went back home. That sounds horrible, but you know what I mean? When your parents come, you just think, oh, okay, I'm going to be judged, or I've got to act a certain way, or I can't be who I want to be because they might not approve, for example, because of the Turkish culture and how they were brought up. And that's not what you do when you're growing up as a Turkish child in Cyprus where they grew up. So, yeah, I definitely felt liberated and freer to make my own decisions and do things that I wanted to do or enjoyed doing. So, for example, I went to uni initially for a sport and exercise science degree, and then I did my PGC in education. And I went off to Leeds a couple of times to do some courses. So my netball umpiring course I did there. But if I was in London, that was never going to happen. My mum was never
mm,
going to let me travel across the country to stay in a hotel on my own and do a course. That was never going to happen. So
mm,
it opened up a world of opportunities for me,
mm,
100%.
mm. So when you went off to Leeds and you had this newfound confidence and things like that, so I'm just listening, thinking back to some of the things you've said, and I want to touch upon the fact that you're a girl who is sister to two boys, and it occurs to me that they probably are, certainly in my family, my brother got away with things that even though I was older than him, I got away with less, you know.
Mm.
So it occurs to me that might have been a similar dynamic where the boys had a bit more freedom, where your parents might not have felt the need to be so protective. And then how was it for you now that you're, flourishing at university and, you know, in your newfound freedom, how did that influence your decisions and the path you've taken in life?
So I think it definitely made me a lot more confident in making those decisions. So I knew that when I left Loughborough, I'd have to go back home. I knew that because there was no way I'd be able to say to my mum, I'm staying here now. I'm not coming back ever. That would be the straw that broke camel's back. So I knew I'd have to go back. But I knew I needed to do something to make sure that when I did go back, I still have my freedom. So, for example, I booked my theory driving test, passed that, got a driver instructor, and started learning in Loughborough before I went back to London because I was adamant that I'd be able to drive a car before I went back to London, so that I knew that I could just jump in, off I go, and my parents wouldn't be as fearful because it's safer. I'm in a vehicle, it's fine. I'll get from A to B and not have to come across anybody, so to speak. So that was something that I was adamant I was going to do. Unfortunately, I didn't pass my test. Came out to London, still not passed my driving test. But I started working at a school in Bexley Heath, and every morning I'd drive there and drive back. So I'd still be learning. I still have a driving instructor. So my parents would still be confident because I'm comfortable even because they knew that I'd be safe still getting to work and coming back because it was a 13-mile journey. And then within the first year of being in London and teaching, I passed my test. And my dad, bless him, bought me a car. And that was it. Off I went. So I had my vehicle that I could go anywhere in. So I would go and see my friends, for example. And if I came home at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, yeah, my parents were still worried, but at least they knew I was safe. I was in a vehicle that I was driving. I wasn't drinking, so that wasn't a concern. And then when I met my husband, who was still in Loughborough at the time, I would drive all the way up to Loughborough on a Saturday, which took a couple of hours, spend the day there and then come back. So I'd be back home in the evening, but at least I'd be back at home where my parents knew I was safe. So yeah, that vehicle gave me even more freedom, so to speak.
That's brilliant. And I had a car from in my 20s and I loved driving. It was and I used to travel between London and Birmingham in exactly the same sense of freedom and being able to do what you want and not having to account for your you know what you're doing. And then you mentioned meeting your husband in Loughborough. And so how about that relationship? It is isn't he fairly traveled as well? Isn't he having you married into another family of
Yes.
of travelers?
So yes, he was born in Newcastle. His parents came over here, then left the UK, went back to Nigeria, where he lived for 8 years. And from there, went to the UAE and lived there until he was about 16. And then he came to the UK with his brother and has been here ever since. So his dad's quite traveled like my dad because they actually both worked in Saudi Arabia at one point. They didn't know each other, but his dad's a doctor as well. His dad's a gynecologist. So it's just normal to go from country to country as an expat. So in that sense, yeah, he's more traveled than I am. But now that he's here, he's settled here. I don't think he actually wants to leave the UK. Whereas I wouldn't mind one day.
This is let me start again. Do you think your experiences have influenced how you influence others? Because as a teacher, um, you're influencing young people's direction, their lives. Do you think it's playing a part in all of that?
100%. I think that's part of what I aim to do every day with my students. I want them to know that it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what people say you can and can't do. As long as you want to do it, you believe in yourself, you can achieve it. So that's the main thing that I want to get across to my students. Yes, I'm there to teach them something, to teach them content for a subject, but I see my job as much bigger than that. So I see it as teaching them the life skills that they need, inspiring them to want to go off and achieve things that maybe they never thought they could or didn't even consider because their parents were telling them that, oh, perhaps let's go down this road instead. So rather than having that conflict with the parent, of course, I'd say, well, think about the different options that may be open to you. If you want to go to university, fantastic. But if not, apprenticeship or starting a business, just trying to give them the confidence to want to try new things. So in my lessons, what I try and do, I get my students to speak as much as they can. So in pairs or in group work and try and present to people, just to build that confidence, develop those social skills, communication skills, so that they can hopefully go off and use that in their lives and be able to give value to the world and do something different, amazing, and be who they want to be and not be stopped from achieving things or put barriers in their place in place in front of them, so that because they're worried, because their parents are worried, for example, that they might not be able to achieve something, or their parents might be worried about where it might take them in the world. And just trying to get the students to see that you can go anywhere in the world and do anything you want to do as long as you want to do it and you have that confidence and that desire and passion to go and achieve that and go and achieve it and break those barriers down, really.
And do you find that your students are quite open? Are they able to kind of talk about that with you? And do they tend to raise concerns that you can relate to?
So when I taught in a mainstream school, they could raise those concerns. And I had students from a variety of different backgrounds and different cultures. And conversations that I'd have with students sometimes, they go, oh, but miss, no, I can't do that because my mum wouldn't allow it. I knew instinctively like where they were coming from. I knew that I'm the only girl, I can't do that, or because I felt those feelings when I was growing up. Even though I wanted to be a PE teacher, I instinctively thought, well, are my parents going to allow me to do this? I'm the only girl. I've got two brothers, not going anywhere near sports. Like, what are they going to think about me? So when my students in the past would bring up things or stories or talk about how they come from quite a strict family, and their parents want to become doctors, for example, and that's what they're looking at doing. I got it. I understood why they feel that sort of pull to their family, that they want to please their parents, especially if it's depending on the culture they come from, where you have that really strong family bond, I suppose, or that cultural pull that you can't really break, because then it leads to issues within your family. So I understand. I understood difficulties that my students were feeling at the time, for sure.
They must have appreciated that empathy, you know, because it's not easy to go against what you think is the vibe or the, you know, or the cultural norm or whatever it is. It's not easy to I mean, when I was a kid, I used to be very sensitive to the fact that I felt my father had made big sacrifices for us. So I put a lot of pressure on myself that I had to achieve certain things. And that actually wasn't there from him, but I thought it was. So even if a parent hasn't articulated it or insisted upon it, it's natural for a child to assume or think, oh, I have to do this or I should be like this. So it must make a huge difference that they can talk to somebody who's able to break some of that down for them so that they can make their own choices.
I think it definitely helped that I was already travelled and I wasn't English as such. I was Turkish Cypriot. I am Turkish Cypriot. So I think when they realised that, oh, Miss, you're Turkish, like, oh, where are you from? Wait, like, and they knew where I was born and they knew my story when I told them, that was intriguing to them, I think, and that sort of created that relationship where they felt comfortable to come and talk to me or ask for advice because they knew that I sort of knew I was more understanding of the environment that they may have been growing up in because that's sort of environment I grew up in, and we have to respect our parents, of course, and we have that cultural pull. But I'm a female PE teacher and I'm Turkish Cypriot, so I've gone off and did what I wanted to do, even though my dad in the background was saying to us, become a doctor, go to university and become a doctor. But just to show them that, well, you can do it. If you want to do something, you want to achieve something, then there's nothing stopping you. It's not about being disrespectful at all to family or parents at all. I've never argued with my parents about wanting to be a PE teacher because I think my dad knew that by bringing us here, he wanted us to do what we could, become the best that we could be and do what we wanted to do in life. And I already had a teacher in our family a very long time ago, not PE teacher, but because I had that sort of role model in the family, they were never going to stop me from becoming a teacher. Okay, probably not a PE teacher, but I came from a quite sporty family anyway. My dad used to play sports as well, so he understood that that was my passion. So the fact that my students are seeing that and seeing that I come from a different background, I was brought up somewhere else, and I've been here since I was 10, but I do have that cultural pull as well. So I think that sort of showed that I was more empathetic to what they were going through, I suppose, or their difficulties in terms of where am I going to go when I've done my GCSEs or university. So yeah, they knew that I understood that a little bit more.
And is it relevant in what you do now as a podcaster in because you're very committed to helping people, and are you helping teachers and students? Is it targeted at both groups of people?
In a way, yes, because it's a ripple effect. So my podcast, Helping Teachers Thrive, is where I produce content on valuable insights, advice, strategies to help teachers in the classroom, which then will have a ripple effect on their students and help those students. So I'm lucky in the fact that I've got years of experience as a mainstream teacher, but I've also got a few years experience as a special needs teacher. So I understand the struggles of special needs students and the triggers and how to identify those triggers and help them regulate, because there are a lot of kids in mainstream education, special needs kids that are suffering because it's not school's fault, it's just the funding, the lack of staff, the large class sizes. So I've basically made it my mission to try and help as many teachers as possible, whether they're newly qualified or been teaching for years, with the strategies that I've used in my classrooms that have worked for me and strategies that I've used to help me improve my relationship with the students and help to inspire the students and show them what they're capable of and create a learning environment that is motivating to them, where they can progress in different ways, not just learning the content, developing knowledge, but like I said earlier, about developing those soft skills, those social skills that are going to help them in life, whether they go to university or start their own business. So yeah, it's definitely a passion of mine to help as many people as possible. If I can help the teachers, then I can help the kids and I can help the next generation that progress and go off to give value to the world. So yeah, it's definitely really important to me.
Wow. Maybe there's a podcast in you for young people directly, because your energy is vibrant.
Thank you.
You talked earlier about your father, and you've inherited his unstoppability. He said that he wanted to be a surgeon and he defied everybody, and you want it in different contexts, but you met your own challenges, but you still, ironically, yours were more in the family, but you still could become the PE teacher you'd always desired to be. So what kind of message do you have for anyone, really, not just the teachers and the students, but for anybody, where we tend to, because I know for me, for moving to America, I still got stuck, confronted, So what would you say is a good tip or good piece of advice to listen to yourself, to listen to what matters to you and how to go forward with that?
Trust your instincts. Trust
Mm,
your instincts 100%. Don't go against what you're feeling on the inside, because that creates that battle within you, and it can be such a it can have such a negative impact on your own well-being and your own mental well-being, because you're trying so hard to please other people, but then you're letting yourself down, and you're not considering yourself and what you want, and ultimately not going to be happy as
mm,
a result of that. So that's like, I will never stop my son from doing what he wants to do. Whatever he wants to do in life, he can do that, because I'm there to advise him and support him, but I'm not there to control him
mm,
and to tell him what to do. I'm just there to help him and be the shoulder that needs to lean on, that he needs to lean on if anything does happen, or he needs support for anything. So always go with what you want in life, regardless of what people think, or regardless of other people's opinions that they're trying to pile on top of your plate, so to speak. So yeah, definitely go with what you believe, what you want to do in life.
mm. I think that's huge because I definitely got, at times stuck in my own mind about, is this, whatever decision I was making when I moved here, what will people think? And
Mhm.
yeah, and so, and I'm more than capable of making my own decisions, but I still got stuck with that exact point that you're referring to. And my freedom came when I stopped. So
Yes, 100%.
yeah. So it's really interesting. When I started to own my own choices and my own decisions, and didn't even feel the need to explain away why I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I became instantly a lot freer. So it's interesting that we've touched upon freedom in this particular conversation because I didn't really think about that. But definitely I've gone through that as an experience in having moved to America, of having to listen to myself, um, and eventually trust myself. But I was surprised at how long it took me to, just have the faith in myself to make my choices and be cool with them. So yeah, I think that's really powerful for anybody at any stage, any age, because it's easy to and natural to, and especially we've talked about culture, to worry about the voices of the culture, of the opinions of others, of the any impact we're having on people. It's natural for us to be concerned, but at the same time, we need to dig deep and stand where we stand.
Mm. Yeah, 100%, because I don't know how different my life would be today if I didn't make those decisions that I made and did what I wanted to do. Because my mum had, of course she did. It's her. It was what she knew. It's all she knew growing up. So my mum had this image of me of marrying into a Turkish family and being a Turkish wife, and she would have loved to go and live in Cyprus rather than come to London. And so my life is completely different to what she expected it to be. But I'll never regret the choice that I made. Maybe how I went about it, maybe, but not the actual decisions and the choice I made, because my life would have been completely different to what it
Mm,
is today. And I'm happy with how my life is today.
mm. And that's an interesting point because, you as a mum fully understand your mum. She just wanted a great life for you and she was envisioning how that would be based on her own experiences. But interestingly, your experiences have opened up a whole manner of things that call into question, I suppose, some of those assumptions, not your mother's assumptions, life's assumptions, where we can assume it
Mm.
should look like this. And so from your own experience, you can't make those assumptions. So it makes you a good guide for people, um, because you've gone through it yourself. You've asked the questions, you've explored, um, and you've made your own choices.
Mm. And it's not easy. It's not that making decisions that benefit you over your family, but that's why it's really important to be able to talk to people, to be able to talk to your family and go to them and say, look, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I like to do. And I think that's really important, having a family that you can talk to and just discuss and let them know how you're feeling and where you want to go in life. So you know you've got that network of support behind you, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that they understand where you're coming from. Even if they don't necessarily relate 100%, but they've got some context to why you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So any parting words of wisdom?
Be true to who you are, because you are with you every day for the rest of your life, and you are the person that you can lean on. And if you are not well within yourself, then that's going to reflect on everything that you do in life. And we've only got one life to live, so be who you are and be the best you can be and enjoy it.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.